Hi everyone, good afternoon. Like in previous classes, like we discussed about like some of the interview questions and scenario based, right? Okay, so today we are going to discuss about like workflows and approval process, like scenario based questions. So let me show you something. Okay, so workflow rules and approval process, right? So before going to workflow rules, like we got some updates, right? Like winter 2023 onwards, like workflow rules we are not going to use, right? I mean, we are not going to create new workflow rules in 2023 hours new environments, right? So why? Because so it's completely updated to like flows. Everybody knows that, right? But if you have any existing workflow rules in your organization, if you have any existing rules, then you have to work on that same workflow rule, right? Okay, so that's the one point. And coming to workflow rules and approval process, we have some different scenario based questions, right? Okay, we'll discuss that. So workflow rules and approval process. So why we are going with the workflow rules and approval process? To perform the automated process. What? To perform the automated process, then we are going with workflow rules and approval process. So what are the different kind of evaluation criteria in events? What are the different kinds of evaluation criteria in workflow rules? So we have three criteria, right? So created and every time it's edited. When third one, created and edited subsequently met the criteria. So these are the three. Created, created and every time edited to meet criteria. Third one, created and edited to subsequently meet the criteria. So these are the evaluation criteria. So we'll discuss about like more why we are going to use created. I mean, what is the difference between the created and created, edited, subsequently met criteria? So what are the different these steps, right? We'll discuss that. Okay, see here. So what is the difference between created and every time it's edited meet criteria and created, edited to subsequently met criteria? We discussed, right? Like what is the difference between the three evaluation criteria? Okay, so I will tell you in simple words. I will tell you in simple words. So first step will be the created. Created means like whenever we are going to create the record, that time only workflow action should be fired. First option, right? While coming to second point, like every time created and edited, right? So while creating the record or editing the record, so if the action should be fired, means like if you 100 times you are going to edit or 100 times you are going to create the record. Both cases, like while creating the record and while editing the record. So two cases, that second option like created and every time it's edited, right? The two cases, four actions should be fired. So that's the second point. While coming to the third one, like subsequently met criteria, right? So this case only like whenever record is created and edited, second point, right? So while coming to third point, when record is created and when record is edited up to subsequently met criteria, and means whenever that criteria should be matched, that time should be, that four actions should be fired, and after that it will be stopped. It won't fire again and again, like second option. In second option, whenever record is created and edited, that option should be whenever record is edited. Like if you edited 100 times, that 100 times should be fired. But while coming to third option, once criteria should be matched. Once criteria should be matched, if you edit that record, it won't fire again and again. So that's the different. Okay, that's the different. See here, if you if we created and every time it's set to meet criteria, whenever we create the record or edited, if the criteria workflow rule meets the trigger every time. If we select criteria and edit subsequently met criteria. Okay, so while creating the record meets, so that workflow will fire, and while editing the record again criteria met, workflow won't be fired. Meeting criteria, right? So meeting the criteria to meeting the criteria. So while create the record, criteria doesn't met, so workflow won't be fired, and while editing the record, so workflow criteria meets the workflow will be fire, not meeting the criteria to meeting the criteria. So this should be like sentence formation in the Salesforce. So sometimes you people are won't follow this kind of terms. So that's the reason I said like clearly like created every time it's edited and subsequently met criteria. So these are the three evaluation criteria. First one should be only once record is created, that time only action should be filed. Okay. Second time, like whenever record is created and edited, that time like if you edit 100 times of the record, 100 times that action should be filed. Third option, subsequently met criteria. So suppose you are going to edit the record, that time that your criteria has been matched, that time that action should be filed. Again, if you edit the record and you change some other field, it won't be filed that criteria. Why? Because our criteria should be already matched, so it won't be filed. But while coming to second case, so if even criteria also matched, if you edit the record and save the record, and edit the record and save the record, that action should be filed 100 times. If you edit and save 100 times, that action should be filed 100 times. So that's the difference. Okay. See here, what are the types of rules criteria? What are the types of rule criteria? So we have two types of criteria will be there. Like one should be criteria met, and second one should be the formula evaluated. Right? Criteria met and formula evaluated means like status equal to high, status equal to case status equal to high, and case not closed equal to true. So these are the two conditions. These conditions should be can met in the uh, like at field level. So that's the one condition. That's the one type of criteria. While coming to the criteria to like formula evaluated. So we creating the formula fields, right? Like based on that formula also we can use that criteria. So we have two types of criteria. So one should be field mapping and one second one should be the formula evaluated. These are the two rules of criteria. So what is the immediate workflow actions? So whenever the record has been saved, updated, so that time that record should be filed immediately. It's nothing but immediate actions. Immediate actions means it will be filed immediately whenever record is updated or saved, right? It should be filed immediately. This is nothing but immediate workflow actions. So the actions will be performed immediately after the criteria met. Same like whenever we are criteria has been met, the save the record or updated, the workflow rule should be filed like immediately. Time dependent workflow means it will take time, means whenever we define some time, right? Like one day after, like 1 hour after, 6 hours after, we define some time, right? Based on that time, the time dependent workflow action should be filed. So what is the time dependent workflow actions, right? The action which will be performed in the future, the action which will be performed in the future based on the any date field. Let's say we updated one field called like tomorrow or day after tomorrow or 6 hours or next 1 hour, right? So that time the time dependent workflow action should be fired. On the time we give a either days or hours or maximum of triple nine value, we can select either before or after. So these are the time dependent workflow actions, right? For which event we can't create a time dependent workflow action. So this is the most important point here. Like for which event we cannot create time dependent workflow actions, which evaluation criteria, right? So created and every time edited to criteria. So second option, right? Created and every time edited to meet criteria. So this is the second option. We can't create time dependent workflow actions. So rest of the two, like created and subsequently met criteria, we have two options, right? That those two have two options, like we can go with time dependent workflow actions. So here, like, what are the different kind of workflow actions? What are the different type of actions in workflows? Like field update, email alert, task, and outbound message. Right here, field update, email alert, task, and outbound message. So these are the four actions. So if you want to update any in the same object, then we can perform the field update. If you want to send any email notification to the customer or user or something, then we can go with the email alert action. And task, if you want to perform any task, like either it should be pending or progress, if you want to go with those things, like you can go with the task. And coming to like fourth option, like outbound message. right? An outbound message, like we can interact with some external systems like SAP CRM, like Salesforce CRM to SAP CRM or Civil CRM, and SAP to like full stack. So this kind of other applications that we can involve through outbound message. We can sending Salesforce user ID to Salesforce IDs to some other platform IDs. So these are the outbound messages. Okay. So what are the types of email alerts? So we have earlier we have email alerts is the one action, right? So in that actions, like how we are going to create the templates. How we are going to create the templates, like we what are the types of the template? Like here, like HTML, you can create HTML template, text template, custom HTML without letterhead and visual force. So these are the four templates available in the Salesforce. You can create different tiles, different styles for these templates. We discussed about in classes, right? So these are the templates. Okay, here like scenario, how they are going to ask some scenarios in through workflow rules. See here, so there is a time based workflow. So there is a time based workflow which will be updated one of the field if the criteria met. Means like we updated one field, okay, based on the time based workflow. Okay, so user submit the record with the valid criteria. Means like we accepted the we updated the same criteria whatever we created on workflow rules. Okay, so user submit the record with valid criteria. Workflow triggered means workflow triggers mean it started, workflow started, so that the field updated is queued in the time dependent flow. Why? Because we are using time based workflow rules. Obviously, right? Like whenever record is updated, that record should be goes to the queue. Why? Because we are following the time based workflow rule. Okay, so here like update the record the time based workflow. Okay, queue is queue which will be fired after the 1 day. Okay, we updated date should be after 1 day. If the user modify the record, if the user modify the record which is submitted before the scheduled date. Let's say I uh, just to, let's assume I updated one record today. Okay, just I created one record today. So as for this scenario, my time based workflow should be that action should be filed on based on the 1 day, after 1 day. Okay, after 1 day, here see here after 1 day. So I created one record. So just now I created 1 day for this time like 2:20 p.m. today, right? So it should be filed after tomorrow. Tomorrow 2 p.m. after that action should be filed. But before that, let's say today evening or today night or tomorrow morning, I adjusted that. I mean I updated that same record again. I updated that same record again. So that's what he say. See here. So if the user modify the record which is submitted before the scheduled date, means my scheduled date should be the tomorrow afternoon 2 p.m. Right? So before that I modify the same record. So that's what this meaning. Okay. So after modification, a record criteria is not meeting. So let's say after I changed some record and my criteria is not meeting that same record, means I changed that criteria. Okay, so that criteria not meeting, whether the field will be updated or not in scheduled date, whether that field should be updated or not in scheduled date. Why? Because it's not, it won't trigger. So it won't trigger. Why? Because today I updated the record based on some criteria, my criteria has been matched, so that action should be goes to the queue. That action goes to the queue, right? So it should be filed on tomorrow afternoon 2 p.m. But before that I modify the date. Before that I modified the date. I modify the same record with a different criteria, but my trigger should be, it won't be fire. So that's what the scenario here, like answer should be, it won't trigger the schedule date, because if you modify the record to not meeting the criteria that in queue, field updated will be removed from the time based workflow queue. So this is the answer, this is the scenario, and this is the answer. Okay, so this is the scenario and this is the answer, right? You got this scenario, right? Okay. Coming to second question, I mean same question from different scenario. See here, for the same scenario, explained above, like previous explained, right? So the question, what happens when we deactivated or modify the criteria of workflow rule to a different criteria, whether the field should be updated or not in schedule date? If a criteria has been matched, then definitely it should be fired. Yes, it will be triggered on schedule date, right? If you modify the same record, that criteria has been matched, then it should be filed on the same date, right? If criteria has been matched, that record should be filed. It's the same schedule date. Here again one more scenario. See here. So, so there are two workflow rules. Okay, so there are two workflow rules on the same object. There are two workflow rules on the same object. So just we can say workflow 1 and workflow 2. Workflow rule 1 and workflow rule 2. If workflow rule 1 fights, then the field should be updated on the same object. Why? Because we created two workflow rules in the same object. Workflow rule 1 should be filed and it should be updating the one field. Okay. So if the field updated and due to the second workflow rule criteria meets. So because we created two workflow rules and second workflow rule, based on the second workflow rule, that field should be updated based on their criteria. But then what will happen? Workflow rule 2 will be fired or not? It won't be fired, right? It won't be fired. 2, it won't fire. First of all, the answer should be it won't be fired. To fire workflow rule 2, so we should enable re-evaluate workflow rules. Checkbox of the field. Checkbox of the field. Update the which there is in workflow rule 1. So this is the another scenario based question. Okay. Coming to second one, I mean other question. So what is approval process? So actually these are the scenario based questions through workflow rules and actions and different questions, right? So while coming to the approval process, what is approval process? So if the criteria of the record meets, by clicking on the submit for approval button, user can submit the record for approval. This is the approval process. The approval process history should be relatedly displayed on the record detail page layout. So we have to add that approval history on the object level in page layout. Then only we can able to see the approval history here. So how to configure the approval process? So we have some different steps also will be there, right, for configuring the approval process. Like before creating the approval process, we should select the object. For that we should be follow the steps. First step should be we need to give some proper approval name, and second step should be give the approval process, approval criteria of the approval process. And we need to fourth step, I mean third step should be we need to select the email template. And the fourth step should be we need to select the users who we are going to submit. And fifth one should be select user whom record should be submitted. So select the user whom record should be submitted. And fourth one should be select the users who can submit the approval. Okay, so these are the 4 or 5 steps. And coming to sixth step, yeah, so initial submission. So here like initial submission for the actions. Seventh step, approval steps, like we need to add some multiple steps either based on the criteria or based on the client's requirements. And eighth step should be each and every step we need to see the approval process actions either rejected, approved, or recall the same operations, right? Ninth step should be if the approver approves the record, action should be under the approval actions, selection will be triggered. So 10th step should be final approval actions section. And 11th one, final rejection action section. And 12th one, recall approval actions. So these are the 12 steps we can follow the configure the approval process. Either it should be like you can say sixth, only we have approval process, we have 6 steps only, but I elaborated more. So that's the reason it's come in 12 steps, but actually we have 6 steps only. Okay, if you read one by step, you will get more clarity on this question, right? Okay. Okay, again one more scenario here, like after activating the workflow process, after activating after activating the approval process, I want to add one more step in I want to add one more step in that approval process. Is it possible? No. See, even after activating the approval process, we can't add one more step in the same approval. So if you want to add more steps, then we have to deactivate the approval process and we have to add the step. See here, the answer should be it's not possible. To add one more step, deactivate the approval process and close the deactivate approval process and add it the new step. So this is the answer. We have to follow that question, scenario based question. Okay. So these are the questions from approval process and process approval process and workflow scenario based questions and answers. Okay. So next, like we'll come up with some new different topics from admin into scenario based questions and answers. Okay. Thank you.